right, before you get into the review lesson, I just wanted to point out some of the big mistakes from the first practice that you did on order of operations. So I'm just going to highlight the biggest mistakes that I saw. I'm not going to go over the full problem. I just want to point out the biggest things that I saw. For example, on number 2, on this middle one on level 1, on this problem, I saw some people doing 4 minus 5 before they did the multiplication. You have to multiply before we do any subtraction or addition, so we really do 4 minus 10. On level 2, I saw some people panic when they saw fractions. Really, fractions and decimals are the same thing, so you can just change these into decimals if you wanted. If you're more comfortable dealing with this as a decimal, as 0.25, and this as 0.5, and then following order of operations from there, those are really the same thing. So then you'd still just follow PEMDAS. You do it in the parentheses, then exponents, then the multiplication. That's the exact same thing as dealing with it as a fraction. On the second one on level 2, some people think that in PEMDAS, since the m comes first, the multiplication has to happen before division, but that's not really true. Those are on the same level, so when we see division and multiplication, if we're trying to decide between those two, then we have to work from left to right. So we actually do the division first. We get 2 times 2. That's 10 divided by 5. That's where that second 2 came from. The exact same thing on the second part of this problem. We have minus 10 and plus 1. Addition and subtraction, while the a comes first in PEMDAS, addition and subtraction are on the same level. So we would actually do the subtraction first. Then we would subtract 10 and then add 1. On level 3, on that first one, I saw some people doing 6 minus 2 first. That kind of just jumps out at you. It seems like you just want to do 6 minus 2 and get 4, but that 2 is being multiplied by all this stuff. Whatever you get from 8 minus 4 squared, which should really be 16, you should be multiplying that times 2 before you do the subtraction. 2 times 16, that answer subtracted from 6. For the most part, we're strong on the middle one there. Just make sure you do everything inside of the square root, and then you do the square root of whatever that number is. This next one was a tricky one. The third one on level 3 was tricky because we had to plug that number in carefully. Whenever you're substituting a number in, you want to substitute it in parentheses. So we put in negative 3 cubed minus negative 3 squared plus negative 3 minus 1. This was the biggest mistake. I saw a bunch of people switching that minus and negative immediately into a plus sign, which is generally okay, but not when we have an exponent. If we have an exponent, you're doing subtraction before you're doing an exponent. We have to square this number first and then change it to this minus sign. We're really subtracting. You get negative 27 minus whatever you get from negative 3 squared. Negative 3 squared is a positive 9. So this does not change into a plus sign. It's subtracting negative 3 squared. Negative 3 squared is that 9. It's positive. We don't have 2 minus signs, so we don't have that canceling out to be a plus sign. All right, number 4, these negative exponents, you always need to do that in the calculator. It's not going to change it into a negative number. It's going to change it into a decimal. 2 to the negative second is 0.25. Minus is the same problem as that last one. Do not change that minus and negative into a plus sign until you find out what that number is. Negative 2 squared is actually a positive, so it doesn't change. It's going to stay as a minus 4. And then minus, we got another negative exponent. That's actually another 0.25, same thing. The middle one on level 4, that negative 2 squared out in front cannot be plugged into the calculator. It's not negative 2 squared in parentheses. This is different from that. Those two are completely different things. One is saying negative 2 times negative 2. The other one, this is saying a positive 4. This one, the other one is saying the opposite of this. It's really saying a subtraction sign after we do the exponent. So that's always going to be a negative. When there's no parentheses, it's always going to stay as a negative. And on that last one, again, these fractions are not that big of a deal. You're allowed to change this into a decimal, so that would be my first step. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. 4 divided by 3 is 1.3 repeated. I'm putting that in parentheses. I'm going to square that, minus, again, 1.3 repeated. You have to follow order of operations inside of the parentheses, so we're going to do 1.3 squared first. That would give us 1.7 repeated. 1.5, still times all of this is 1.7 repeated minus 1.3 repeated. When you subtract these, you get 0.4 repeated. Make sure you're not just using 0.4. That's really a very different number. 0.4 repeated and just 0.4 are different. So when you're typing that into the calculator, make sure you fill the calculator with as many 4s as you possibly can. Type in 0.444444 times 1.5, and that should give you the decimal 0.6 repeated. And we can change that into a fraction. Really, that's the fraction 2/3. You don't have to change that into a fraction, but you might need to recognize that if it's a multiple choice question, you might need to understand that 0.6 repeated and 2/3 are really the same answer.